You're listening to a small
listening
good
to-
thing.
listening to a small
You're
good
listening
thing.
to a small
To a small good thing.
good thing
Small Good Thing with Steve Zell.
with Steve Zell.
A few episodes ago, I had Hud McWilliams on the show briefly. Dr. McWilliams is a practicing psychologist in Colorado. He's also a practicing Christian and has spoken around the world, mostly in North America and Europe, about faith and psychology and how those two things intersect. Since it was Father's Day last week, I thought I'd give him a call and talk to him about fathers and fatherhood, as well as what it means to be a man nowadays and some other things. Hud, thanks for coming back. You've been talking to people for decades now. What's changed in your experience in the counseling room when it comes to the subject of fathers, fatherhood, what it means to be a father, or has anything changed over the years?
Wow. I think for me, there's been a cataclysmic shift, I suppose would be the way to say it, culturally, in the West at least. And it comes from lots of elements, I believe. But for me, most significant would probably be that there's less relational glue, and the movement to elevate women, which I'm super for, has some elements in it that have, like if I strengthen one, then I have to weaken the other. So if I strengthen women, I have to weaken men. And I don't think that's been helpful. And so I think a number of those things have merged. And what we have today is we have a lot of confusion, I think, more than anything else, about what might make up a male and what might really make up a whole female and what might make up as a result, what are the elements that really go into making up fatherhood. There used to be more socially, culturally driven, and I don't think they are so much anymore. And so the end product is puzzlement, confusion, and to me, it's like weakening the glue
I'm wondering, with this weakening of the relational glue, how does that come out specifically when you're talking to men, fathers, but maybe men in general, if we want to broaden this a little bit?
Well, maybe a way to approach this for me would be, I listened to a pastor a while back say that, and he targets men, trying to elevate them, I think, in a good way in general. And he says that men in the Bible are designed to have to do two things primarily. One is to provide for their families, and the other thing is to protect their families. And he morphs that into a definition of love. And I thought, as I came away from that there was something missing, and I couldn't figure it out right away. And it took me a while, and I heard him say it again later, and I was moved to think about it one more time. And I thought, I think there's merit to that. We are to provide, and I can talk about that a little more here in a minute. But and protection is tricky, but I think we're to protect as well. And then the last thing that I felt was missing is we have to learn how to connect. And so I think a father then is as a whole person has to be able to do all three of those things, which he has to provide provision. Is not only a house and food and that kind of thing, but it's provision for emotional needs, etc. Paul says in Ephesians that we're to grow up in all aspects, and all aspects include that kind of thing, it seems like to me. And so provision is usually the default for most men. We get a job, we pay for the family, we send them through school and feed and clothe them, and then we feel like we've done our job. And that's only part of it. You have to provide for them emotionally and relationally and all these other dimensions. And then I thought about the protection thing. A lot of times it's just like protecting people from the wild, etc. But I don't know about you, but when I listen to movies and lyrics and songs and storylines and TV. I find a lot of times people will say, "Trust me," and the other line that they say along with it a lot of times is, "Stay with me, or I'll always be here for you, or I'll never leave you, or I'll always protect you." And there's a great Stephen Sondheim line comes out of Sweeney Todd, the musical, and it says, "Nothing's going to harm you, not while I'm around." And every time I hear that, it's a beautiful song, but it's wrong sentiment. You can't do that, So protection is really tricky. And I was thinking about how God protects us. He doesn't make life safe in the garden. So safety is maybe not the right word for protection. And I got to thinking, what really does protect us? Well, what really protects us is character development, where I have the ability to critically think, and I have discernment and shrewdness and common sense and wisdom and whatever else goes into character, which really protects you no matter where you are on the planet, circumstantially. So I laughed, but I was thinking about talking to you today, and I was thinking about, being a father. I have 2 daughters, and they're both married, and both of their husbands have asked me at different times, "What'd you do to your girls?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And because both of my girls are very strong, and strong in the very best sense of the term. They're just strong people, and that's why they're married. In that sense, they delight in life, and that I think. I wish I could take some credit for that. I can't, but as I watch them develop, I think that's the thing I would want for them. I would want them to embrace the whole of life, which means that you have to think and do and be and fail and get up, and all that to me is just people stuff, not gender so much. And anyway, and then connection is my hobby horse, because I think relationship is hard often, and maybe hard is the wrong word, but I think we need to play more. And one thing I think good fathers do is they teach their families how to play well, and that means not compete so much as play. And playfulness is really at the heart of any relationship if it's joyful, if it's going to be fun. So anyway, just some things I thought about related to how hard it is today to find guys that are not conflict avoidant and want everything to be smooth and happy, and then maybe we provide, or maybe we protect a little bit, but we don't spend much time connecting. And so my experience is primarily around the connection one. It's we don't see it modeled. If you don't see it modeled, it's really hard to mimic something that's not modeled in the culture. And so growing up's hard. I think that's the job of a father, is to help his family grow up and launch them with joy.
Yes, provision, protection, and connection are the 3 things you think sort of define the role of fathers and husbands. You feel that men do the first 2 things, providing and protecting, sort of naturally. They gravitate towards that. And you feel they need to work more or concentrate more on connecting, relationally and emotionally connecting. Now, I've heard you say that before in other places, and I want to push back on that a little, if I may. When I hear you say that men need to work on relating, the first underlying message I get from that, and I'll admit, maybe I'm a little self-defensive here, but what I hear is that women don't have to work on that somehow they're okay. Maybe they're even good at it, but men as a gender are not. And then the second message I hear beneath that is, at root, all or maybe most relational problems between men and women in marriage, let's say, is the man's fault. He's the one who needs to work, not the woman. You seem to be saying, or at least I'm taking it that way anyways, for now, that she is fine in that department and needs to do or work at nothing. It's all the man. How do you respond to that?
if you want to hear some real sadness, sorrow related to that, I've had 4 couples recently. They're all getting divorced at this point, and the women all pulled out. All the women pulled out. Here's why: for no good reason. The guys were not acting out. There's no direct betrayal. There's just this angst over not having, I don't know what's missing for them, but all 4 women, I actually interviewed all 4 women in this process, and I would just stand back and say, there's no basis for this. None. You're leaving because your culture is telling you aren't happy. Well, grow up. I'm sitting in the middle of these guys, and I just ache over it. They've been accused of all kinds of things, and the guys aren't perfect, but all of them have come forward, and all of them have worked. I'd probably land in this space. I think that maybe my way of trying to say the difference between men and women shows up in terms of the order in which emotion is in dynamically inside of each of us. For men, emotion is not the lead piece in most cases, and for women it is, especially a spectrum of it. And I just think men have a hard time with that. And so here fairly recently in history, we have started identifying a thing called emotional intelligence. And the reason for that is because the most effective men in business and the most effective men in leadership are the people, by and large, that are emotionally intelligent, more whole. And then we've added social intelligence to that as well. So we're talking about relationships and emotion at the core. And I think men have not always been trained or treated or expected to learn that stuff. And now I think it's showing up as being much more significant and much more important, and there's much more fiscal weight put on it in industry, and because we have a whole different world. We're not making steel so much anymore as we are, working on Wall Street or in a information industry or whatever. But the whole point being, I just think there's not an excuse for men not to have to traffic in the emotional dynamics of the world, and we do. We keep slotting us into places where we don't know how we feel, and we don't know what to do with feelings. And feelings are overwhelming, and we don't talk about them or teach them or train people in them, or however you want to frame it. And I have experiences with people and a couple clients that are high up in industry that really needed help emotionally to navigate their job, and they were great in terms of strategy, but they weren't great in terms of connecting with people. And so this connection piece was what I was hired for. And all I did was went along and ask them questions. How did that go with that person? What did you notice? What did you think you missed? And might have missed. And then we'll go back and experientially they begin to see, I didn't hear what that person was really saying. And I didn't go slow enough to ask questions. And I think it's so much easier to try to fix something rather than relate to it. And I believe what the brain science is teaching us, that we need to pay attention to, most people are not problems that need to be fixed. Most people are people that need to be related to. And a lot of kids look at their parents, especially their fathers later on in life, and they look back and they have a father wound. And the father wound usually is that they didn't connect with him. And the father, even though may have been really proud of the kid, never said it to the child or never expressed that he really loved him, even though he probably did, but he didn't know how to communicate it in some way. And so I believe a lot of that's just kind of a false dynamic that doesn't need to be there if we'll just open up the door to say, hey, this doesn't make you tough or not tough. It makes you whole. And why wouldn't you want to be whole as opposed to just fragmented piece? And I think what I think we've hunkered down and kind of shut down some of this stuff and not asked the question, what does it mean to be a whole person in our world? And a whole person then attends to all this stuff because it's complicated and makes it messy. And that's what's beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with it.
I'm going to change gears a little, though I think everything here might be related. Now, I know that you are asked to speak at different churches and that you have a background and an interest in the church. It's been reported on in the religious press the last few years that men are going to church less and less. A few months ago, for example, I listened to a podcast where the discussion operates on a little bit of a higher level, and the name of that episode was "The Church Doesn't Get Men. Can It Learn from Non-Christians Who Do?" And the moderators specifically were remarking on the fact that Jordan Peterson appeals to men, especially younger men, apparently, and they were trying to figure out the reason for that and what they might learn from it. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about why fewer men than before go to church nowadays.
Wow. It would just be a guess on my part. My view of the world's pretty narrow. But personally, I mean, I have this limited kind of experience, but I think that when the church doesn't speak to the needs of the people at the time, contextually, I think people drift away. They just won't stay. And I think a lot of guys back off of that, and they don't need one more thing to do that's just neutral. They need something to do that will be additive. And I think a lot of times churches wind up being neutral. They're trying to be nice, but they're not disturbing. And I think the thing that makes us grow, no matter where we are, is disturbance. And I honestly believe that every human on the planet kind of is wired the same way. And I believe that the church has taken itself kind of out of the game a lot of times by just reflecting the culture and not really telling us the truth. And so, to me, the thing that keeps being missed in our culture is this character development. Character is where you have integrity in a person's life and you can trust them and they're dependable and reliant and they're not so predictable as they are faithful. And I don't think most of this stuff winds up being a gender-described item ultimately. If the person matures, they begin to embrace all of that. But if they're not mature, then they begin to fragment into these more, I guess, stereotypical or I don't know, created roles, if you will. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's stifling and not very healthy. And then the gender comes in as a color piece at the end, if you will, rather than the core piece. So I really don't know the answer for your church thing. I think men are looking for something that's solid and thoughtful and speaks back into the culture, which is pretty toxic, I think, right now. And so.
Just a little commercial here for the show. If you haven't already, why don't you subscribe to the show on Apple iTunes or Google Play or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. If you do that, every time a new podcast comes online, it automatically pushes forward to you and you can see that. It's just an easy way to also take a look at other previous episodes that maybe you haven't heard. On an upcoming episode, I get to talk to Dr. Douglas Axe. He's a researcher and a molecular biologist in Seattle who is part of a growing group of scientists that are skeptical about the scientific establishment's uncritical narrative of evolutionary biology. So I'm looking forward to that, and you may want to listen in. Hud, you recently wrote a book called Discipline of Disturbance. Good title. What does that title mean? And what were you trying to get at in your book?
Maybe I could start this way. The quote recently I heard was that all relationships are perpetually conflicted. And if you step back from that phrase just a minute, it's telling you that you'll never be fully in sync with another human being because we're so unique and different, and we're individually with ourselves all the time, and we can't ever be with another person all the time, and on and on and on you go. And I think that's kind of the core of what I mean when I talk about the world's disturbing by design. It was designed to disturb us that way, to keep us from ever being able to find somebody that's exactly like us, be able to control another human being or a situation completely. And it's the way we grow. It's the way we learn. It's the way we develop and change if we will lean into it and be open to it. And so my observation is that most of us think disturbance is bad. Most of us think that the garden God created, this Eden place, was without anything to, surprise you, if you will. But that's a disturbance. And I think the garden was highly a learning context, and that's the thing that I think we avoid. We want to control rather than fail, I guess. And failure is such a core element in learning. And maybe my best example is this. I had a couple I was talking to here just recently, and I think they have a lot of pain in their dance, and they're trying to kind of sort that out. And kudos to them for doing that. And but the problem is they want to be perfect. They don't want to ever make a mistake or fail at all. And I think because of that, they've made it so much harder on themselves. And so I used a baseball analogy, which is terribly American, and it's and also just narrowed down to sports. But there is a truth to this. In baseball, you can get ready to go up and hit the ball, and you take the bat from, and you get up there by the plate, and the pitcher throws the ball, and you still have a responsibility to swing the bat, and it's very, very hard to hit a baseball. And I think the problem with it is that you don't connect very often, and there's a ton of failure in that game. And I think a lot of people don't like the game for that very reason. But from just a metaphor standpoint, I think the challenge of life is to go up to the plate and swing the bat. And if you miss, you miss, but at least you're in the game. So many people won't take the risk of even swinging the bat. They get prepared maybe, but they don't play the game. And so to me, the life is just that. It's a full, rich, unpredictable, delightful, creative game that's supposed to be essentially playful. And that's and the nature of it, the built into the nature of it, is this disturbance. You don't know who's going to win. You don't know who's going to hit. You don't know where the ball's going to go. And so that's the playful surprise part. And you wouldn't go watch a game if it didn't have that.
Right, exactly.
And in order for it to be that way, there has to be limits. And the limits are, I can't do it all. I need other people. It's no good just to be alone. I have to learn how to relate. And anyway.
Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and be sure to put a link to your website where people can check out your book, Discipline of Disturbance. One last question. You get 15 seconds to answer. Will there be disturbance in heaven?
Oh, I think so. There will be continual learning, unimpeded by sin, for eternity.
Thank you so much. Our time is up. Hud, happy Father's Day to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and I hope that we'll be able to do another program in the future.
Thank you, Steve, and happy Father's Day to you, too.
I don't care how late you stay out. Stay out as late as you want. You want to borrow the new car? You want to borrow my credit card? Kids today, they really have it rough.
Well, coming back around to Father's Day, which I know was last week, but I don't care, I'm going to close with a little video called Stuff Dads Never Say. Thanks for listening. I hope you heard some small good things.
Just do whatever the mechanic says to do. Vehicle maintenance is completely overrated. Look, whatever the mechanic is asking, just pay him. Pay him whatever he wants. I wish they had soap operas at night. I like that boy. You should date him. You should date him immediately. Well, what about the creepy guy with the motorcycle? He's cute. Yeah, sure. Spring break in Tahiti sounds fun. Hey, make sure you get all your video games done before you start your homework. You don't have to pass all your classes. What? You have a project due tomorrow and you've known about it for 4 weeks and you haven't started yet? Sweet! Doesn't anybody want to know if we're there yet? Remember, if you need anything between midnight and 4 a.m., please come wake me up. Hey, I'm on the phone. Could you bring the baby over and let him climb all over me? Hey, can you please turn that music up? Well, we just stopped for lunch 10 minutes ago, but yeah, let's stop again. I never have trouble with my toddler. I never have trouble with my teenagers. I never have trouble with my adult children. You know, she's right. We are ruining her life. Yes, more homework to correct. All right, whining. Yay, tantrums. Vomit. We just really need to spoil these kids more. Sorry, buddy. I don't know any good jokes at all. You're 16. You pretty much know everything now. I think 18's a great age to get married. Okay, remember, make sure you turn on all the lights before you leave the house. Hey, could you leave the front door open for a couple hours? Thanks. Whoa! Money really does grow on trees.